Tonight on Bridge City News, residents in Taber let local candidates know their concerns at an all-candidates forum earlier today. Conservative candidate Rachel Harder stopped by our studios to talk about the Lethbridge drug crisis. And video journalist Naveen Day has tips for parents on how to protect kids from sexual predators.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. One person was killed earlier today following a crash between an SUV and a semi-truck. Police say the accident occurred around 6 o'clock this morning on Highway 519 between Granham and Nobleford. Fort Macleod RCMP say a woman was traveling eastbound on the 519 in her SUV when the vehicle collided with the oncoming semi. Highway 519 was closed for a few hours and traffic was rerouted on Highway 23 and Highway 2 as police investigated. The federal election is just over 2 weeks away now. Federal candidates running in the Bow River riding gathered in Taber earlier today. As Ainsley O'Reilly reports, things got a little heated.
Bow River's Conservative candidate, Martin Shields, was welcomed by cheers and even signs of support for his party.
It humbles you because you want to do the best job of representing those people who are supporting you.
Shields says that when he talks to young people, the economy is their main concern.
Most of them, their families either own small businesses or they work in small businesses, and they're very concerned because it's very economically tough in this riding if you're in the oil and gas industry.
I think Alberta is really a hub of that economic power and growth we have in Canada.
The other parties touched on issues that students are approaching them with.
I think there's a lot of concern around climate change. There is always climate change. We're not sure how much of it is caused by man.
A lot of it is our environment. I don't think they realize about health care in the same way that others do because they never were without.
Future employment, and which is a really concern, a genuine concern. They want to make sure that they can get good jobs, meaningful jobs, high-paying jobs in their fields if possible.
After the event, with students watching, a heated exchange occurred between NDP's Lynn MacWilliam and the Christian Heritage Party's Thomas Lipp.
I saw two candidates who had quite a disagreement, and I think there is a lot of tension and there's lots of division. We need to sort of focus on the main issues. We're all Canadians, and we need to try and focus on a government that will get us all ahead.
In my point of view, I thought it was kind of unprofessional that happened, and they're here to represent their party, and when people like us see that, I think it's hard for them to want to put their trust into that party.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The opioid crisis continues in many cities across North America, including right here in Lethbridge. Conservative candidate for the Lethbridge riding, Rachel Harder, stopped by BCN recently and asked her what the Tory plan is in dealing with the drug crisis in our city.
I would say that these individuals who struggle with an addiction need to be given a second opportunity for a dignified lifestyle. They need to be reunified with family members. They need to have an opportunity to have a roof over their head and consistent housing. They need to have the opportunity to pursue employment or education. These are the things that make up the Canadian dream, if you will, and that we should give everyone an opportunity to have. And it requires detox. It requires recovery.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge Conservative candidate and the incumbent Rachel Harder discussing drugs and her party's plan for our region should they form government. That's coming up in the second half of our show. About 40 members of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees gathered along University Drive over their lunch hour today. Many expressed their concerns for what they say are potential cuts to public sector jobs.
We've been having these all across the province for the entire summer, and now we're heading right into fall. And of course, Bill 9, we did have the injunction, which was stayed back to the original Bill 9. So we're hoping that in October we can finish these arbitrations, and the government will realize that breaking contracts and not being fair to public service workers is not the thing to do, because we will fight back against that, and the members have been very vocal across the province, and today at the University of Lethbridge we're being vocal here as well. So at some point the government's got to realize that the public sector workers are who runs this province, who takes care of the people in this province, and they need to stand up and respect those workers.
Today was a day across Alberta that we remember the many murdered and missing Indigenous women. A special event celebrating the Sisters in the Spirit took place at Lethbridge College.
This is my cousin Beverly Ann Robotham. She was 43 in 2000 when she was murdered, and so that would make her what, 62 or something like that now. But it's been a tough 19 years because we have gone for 19 years basically with no justice.
My grandmother, Gloria Bird Blackplume, was murdered in Calgary by two men. They were never charged. So the college, they just wanted to get their students involved, especially the ones that have been affected personally by this.
The wind turbine technician program at Lethbridge College now has a new partner. The college signed a $100,000 three-year agreement with the safety training company Team One Academy, Inc. This partnership will apparently make Lethbridge College graduates even more attractive to employers as they enter their industry.
Our wind turbine program here at Lethbridge College has been around for just over 15 years now, and we've been training students to be wind turbine technicians through construction and maintenance of the wind turbines around southern Alberta and around the whole country, and some around the world, even some have gone. We have a new partnership to announce with Team One Academy. So Team One Academy is Ontario-based, and they are one of only two companies certified to teach the GWO training. So GWO is the Global Wind Organization.
Delisle says Lethbridge College has the first turbine technician program in North America and trains the most students in the BZEE network, which is a worldwide training network. The University of Lethbridge was ranked as one of the best universities in the country. Out of the 19 universities, Maclean magazine ranked the U of L the 5th best. The top category for Lethbridge were the medical and science grants. The university also fared well with library acquisitions, student services, and operating budget. Now, in a separate survey where students were polled, the U of L ranked 10th on overall student satisfaction. A federal Conservative candidate in Regina says he had a prior conviction for impaired driving. Warren Steinley, who was running in the Regina-Leuven riding, said the conviction took place when he was just 19. The former Saskatchewan Party MLA says he took responsibility for his actions and has been pardoned. Steinley resigned from the legislature last month to pursue federal politics. On the federal election campaign trail, Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she is losing patience with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. She's accusing Singh of spreading misinformation about her party. May says Singh has falsely claimed the Greens are wobbly on abortion rights, weak on national unity, and prepared to possibly prop up a Conservative minority government.
There aren't any candidates whom I'm aware who have ever declared themselves to be anti-abortion. We vetted everybody. I know that there's a third-party group that is essentially a voice of the NDP that doesn't want to let this drop. I call on Mr. Singh to be honest about this. He also has candidates that have at one time or another in their lives said they were pro-life. It's a non-issue.
Now, speaking of Mr. Singh, a day after a man approached him in Montreal suggesting he cut off his turban to seem more Canadian, the NDP leader says he has experienced incidents like this his entire life. He says some people who make comments about the appearance of others are well-intentioned, but those incidents can still cause real pain.
For me, I mean, it's something that I've faced my whole life, so it's not something that I'm surprised by. In that case, I think the guy was trying to be friendly, but that's a thing with when people say mean things, that they don't always intend for it to be mean, but it's hurtful, and a lot of Canadians face that all the time. Casual comments that demean people because of their gender, their sexuality, the color of their skin, their spiritual beliefs. That happens all too often. And I want to send a clear message to Canadians who've been told to change who they are just to fit in or to get ahead. I want people to be who they are, to believe in yourself.
There's some new controversy surrounding Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. He recently admitted that he is a dual citizen, Canada and the United States. He did, however, say he filed his papers in August to renounce his American citizenship. Now, speaking of Mr. Scheer, he admits that he is pro-life, but reiterated that he will not reopen the abortion debate.
So, do it the old-fashioned way? I've always answered this question openly and honestly. From the first time I ran for office in 2004 to when I ran for the leadership of the party in 2016 to after I won the leadership of the party. My personal position has always been open and consistent. I am personally pro-life, but I've also made the commitment that as leader of this party, it is my responsibility to ensure that we do not reopen this debate, that we focus on issues that unite our party and unite Canadians, and that's exactly what I'll do, and that's why I will vote against measures that attempt to reopen this debate. All our policies are centered around treating all Canadians equally and supporting the rights of women. We will continue to ensure that that women are treated fairly and equally in this country, and that their rights are always protected.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau says if he is re-elected Prime Minister, he would look at ways of improving medical assistance in dying legislation. A Quebec judge invalidated sections of the federal and Quebec laws on medically assisted dying last month, ruling they were unconstitutional. Trudeau says the Liberals will look into seeing how the law can be improved upon.
Well, I think obviously when it comes to an issue that is so important, so delicate, so difficult for so many families, the government needs to make sure we're getting the balance right. The balance between protecting the most vulnerable and making sure people's rights and choices are respected. That's why we moved forward on responsible legislation 3 years ago, but we recognize that we need to take more steps to move forward as a society. We recognize that court cases would come in, that people would be evolving as a society, and that's what we've responded to. We will move forward in a responsible way with legislation that responds to that.
The MGM Resorts has agreed to pay up to $800 million US in compensation to the victims and families affected by the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, which claimed 58 lives and injured hundreds more. The shooter stayed at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, which is owned by the MGM.
I'm very pleased to announce, and you may have heard already, that there's an $800 million resolution of the case being paid for by MGM Hotels. MGM has stepped up and done the right thing, so the victims can put this behind them once and for all. They didn't always do the right thing. They didn't secure their premises at all, virtually open to anyone that wanted to walk in, and one gentleman did with 17 weapons, thousands of rounds of ammunition, unimpeded. That's going to change.
Life has been really hard the last couple of years. I have 2 kids. To think maybe I know that I could go places and it's safer now. To kind of just know that something good can come from something that was so horrible is, I guess, the only thing I could ask for out of this.
As a parent, you want to ensure that your children are always protected, especially when it comes to their online habits. In the United States, recent arrests of men who allegedly tried to have sex with kids have prompted police across North America to issue warnings of apps that can be used by predators to lure kids. BCN's Naveen Day has compiled a list of those apps to watch out for on your kids' phones.
It is often hard to tell what your kids or grandkids are up to when they're staring at their phones or tablets. Apps like WhatsApp and Snapchat are widely known and accepted by parents. Despite that, they can share your kids' live location with other users, people they may not even know. In fact, Snapchat has a new feature called Snap Map, which keeps your child's contacts up to date on his or her location. Other apps you may not know include Meet Me, an app where teens can easily be in contact with users much older than them, with an emphasis on dating. Then there's Scout, which is a flirting app that is used to meet and chat with new people. Teens and adults are in different groups, but ages are not verified. Badoo and Bumble are dating apps for adults, but teens can still find ways to join. Grindr is geared towards the LGBTQ2 community. It allows users to share photos and meet up based on the phone's GPS location. Holla is an app that allows you to do live video chat with people nearby or around the world. Whisper is a social confessional where kids can remain anonymous but still share their feelings, and it can reveal your child's location for a meetup. And lastly, a very sinister app to be watchful for is Secret Calculator, a calculator app with a hidden area in which kids can hide explicit photos, videos, and even browser history. Back to you.
That was video journalist Naveen Day. There's some great new movies playing at the Mill this weekend, including the action film Hobbs and Shaw. With more, here's Len Binning with another Movie Mill Minute.
In 2003, the world was mounting evidence to go to war against Iraq. Catherine Gunn worked for the Secret Service in Britain, and she leaked some information trying to prevent this unjust war.
I've got something you need to see.
Who brought you this? Friend?
Be careful.
If this is real, you could go to jail just for having it in your possession.
You're a spy. You work for the British government.
No, I work for the British people. I do not collect information so that the government can lie to the British people.
Former enemies Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham must team up against Idris Elba, who's got a biochemical that threatens the world.
This job requires stealth. Look at you. I'm trying to save the world, which, for the record, will be my 4th time.
Looks like great movies at the mill once again. Another beautiful day in our city as the snow continues to melt, and a great weekend is shaping up as well. A complete look at the weather forecast is coming up. Another nice fall day in the Windy City. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near 2 degrees. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high expected near 12. Sunday, lots of sunshine again and a high near 14. Monday, sunny and 16 degrees. A cold front moves in on Tuesday, bringing rain mixed with snow and the mercury dropping to +1. Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a high of 2. Thursday, warming up slightly to 8 degrees under a sunny sky. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 17 degrees and an average low of 2. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1943 at 32 degrees, and the record low was -11 in 2000. Sunrise was at 7:35, sunset at 7:05. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria should receive some rain at 14, rain as well and 15 degrees for Vancouver. It should be mainly cloudy and 12 degrees in Calgary on Saturday. Clearing at 12 as well for Edmonton. A mixture of sun and cloud and 13 for Regina. A chance of showers and 13 degrees for Saskatoon. Rain and 10 is expected in Winnipeg tomorrow. Toronto will be overcast and 14. Sunny and 13 degrees for Ottawa. Partly cloudy and 13 as well for Montreal. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should be sunny and 14. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be partly cloudy and 13. Charlottetown, PEI will have light showers and 10. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect light rain and a high near 5 degrees for tomorrow. WestJet Airlines says it is inspecting 43 aircraft following a directive issued by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. The agency ordered the inspections of Boeing 737 next-generation airplanes after cracks were discovered on a small number of those planes. Calgary-based WestJet says it has not had any structural cracks on its 737 fleet and expects minimal disruption from the inspections. Air Canada says it does not have any of the Boeing 737 NG planes. The FAA order comes amid the continued grounding of Boeing 737's MAX aircraft following 2 deadly crashes. Canada's merchandise trade deficit beat expectations in August by falling to $955 million. Stats Canada says that was down from $1.4 billion in July. Economists had expected a deficit of around $1 billion, according to data firm Refinitiv. Exports rose 1.8% following 2 straight months of declines. It was mainly due to higher exports of energy products and aircraft. Imports were up 1%, mostly on higher imports of gold and crude oil. Husky Energy is selling off its light oil refinery in Prince George, BC. It is continuing a review of its retail and commercial fuels business. The deal with Tidewater Midstream is worth $215 million in cash. Tidewater may also pay an additional $60 million over 2 years under certain contingencies. The Calgary-based companies say their employees will keep their jobs after the deal closes. Husky will purchase 90% of its diesel and gas capacity for 5 years to supply its gas stations and Husky retail partners. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 80 points on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 372. The NASDAQ is up 110 to 7982. And the S&P 500 was up 41 points to 2952. Oil was up 36 cents to 52.81 per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to 2.35. Gold is down 45 cents to 15.04 per ounce. And silver is down a cent to 17.55 an ounce. Wheat is at $210 per metric ton, barley's at $206, canola's at $461, and corn is at $284 per metric ton. Live cattle is at 55 cents to $107.35, feeder cattle is down 38 cents to $141.98, lean hogs were down 3 cents to $62.40, and the Canadian dollar is up slightly on the day to 75.12 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, one person was killed earlier today following a crash between an SUV and a semi-truck. Police say the incident occurred around 6 o'clock this morning on Highway 519 between Grantham and Nobleford. Fort Macleod RCMP say a woman was traveling eastbound on 519 in her SUV when the vehicle collided with the oncoming semi. The Lethbridge candidate for the Conservative Party, Rachel Harder, stopped by our studio recently to discuss our city's drug crisis and how a Tory government, if elected, can better help our farmers. That interview is just around the corner. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Lethbridge and District Pro-Life Association invite you to come to be a support at their annual International Life Chain on Sunday, October 6th from 2 to 3 p.m. along the east side of Mayor McGrath Drive South. This is a peaceful and prayerful public demonstration to address the need of our society to protect all human life and to acknowledge those who have been hurt as a result of abortion. For more information, visit lifelethbridge.org or call 403-320-5433. Do you enjoy helping others in our community? Volunteers are needed in Lethbridge and Medicine Hat to support adults participating in local AHS recreation and leisure programs. AHS is looking for those who will provide guidance and encouragement to people taking part in aquatics, walking to wellness, and expressive arts. To learn more about this opportunity, call 403-388-6311 or apply online at albertahealthservices.ca. The City of Lethbridge's residential fall leaf collection program is underway from now to November 15th. Residents can call 311 Monday to Friday between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. to arrange for pickup. Leaves must be put in paper yard waste bags and placed in the area where garbage is normally collected. Paper yard waste bags are available for purchase at retail stores throughout Lethbridge. For more information about the residential fall leaf collection program, visit lethbridge.ca or call 311. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
It's been an exciting federal election campaign so far, and we want to hear from all of our Lethbridge candidates. In studio today, joining me is Rachel Harder, the federal Conservative candidate seeking re-election in the Lethbridge riding. Rachel, welcome back to BCN.
Thanks so much, Hal. It's good to be here.
So your first term, the last 4 years, I bet you went by fast, didn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It's been amazing.
So how did it feel? How did it go your first year as MP?
Yeah, it was an amazing 4 years. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to serve the constituents of Lethbridge. I feel incredibly privileged and honored to have that opportunity. I think my focus right from the beginning was listening followed by action. That's what I said, and that's what I've done my best to follow through on. So making sure that I'm out and about and I'm in the community and I'm at events and I'm at people's doors and I'm meeting with people one-on-one and going to businesses and touring them and not-for-profit organizations and other stakeholders within our community, and making sure that I really understand the concerns within Lethbridge. And so that's been a really important priority to me. And then making sure that I take that voice and bring it to Ottawa and advocate on behalf of my constituents here and the local needs within Lethbridge.
So when you're knocking on those doors, Rachel, right now, what are some of the big concerns that people are sharing with you? I bet you the drug crisis is near the top.
Yeah, for sure. That's the number one thing that's coming up at the doors right now. So my team and I have knocked nearly 25,000 doors at this point in time. And so we've been working hard talking to constituents from, all across the riding. And the supervised consumption site and the impact of the drug crisis is the number one issue at the doors. And what I'm hearing is that people are concerned for their safety and for their well-being. I'm hearing from families that, they want to raise their family here. They thought that it was going to be a safe community to do so, but now they're hesitating. They're having second thoughts and wondering if they should perhaps look at moving elsewhere. I'm also hearing a lot from seniors. So within our downtown core, very close, we actually have a lot of adult residents. And so those individuals moved to these condos in order to be, close to downtown and the conveniences of life. But they're now afraid. They're afraid to leave and to go and enjoy Lethbridge downtown, and that's really unfortunate. So they're wanting some solutions, and certainly I'm wanting to bring those.
Have some of the people also come to you with solutions? What they would like to see?
Yeah, for sure.
Like maybe intox, detox, counseling on top of the SCS at Arches?
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying, why are we not going towards an abstinence-based approach? Why aren't we going towards detox? Why aren't we giving these people who are struggling with an addiction, why aren't we giving them a second chance at life? And I would agree with that voice. I would say that these individuals who struggle with an addiction need to be given a second opportunity for a dignified lifestyle. They need to be reunified with family members. They need to have an opportunity to have a roof over their head and consistent housing. They need to have the opportunity to pursue employment employment or education. These are the things that, that make up the Canadian dream, if you will, and that we should give everyone an opportunity to have. And it requires detox, it requires recovery.
What about the homeless issue in our city? How do we really tackle that head on?
Yeah, I think, you know what, I think first off, we have to acknowledge that these are people and that they have a story. And for many, they're living on the streets and not wanting to be there. And so those are the individuals who we can help. We can build relationship with them and seek out permanent housing for them. We also have to acknowledge that there are some who actually who choose that lifestyle and it is more comfortable to them. And so there too, we have an opportunity to continue to build relationship with them and to support them in the ways that they need.
What about affordable housing? How can we really tackle that issue as well? I know Andrew Scheer's talked about there's a plan for taxation, making life more affordable for Canadians, but what about the affordable housing issue?
Yeah, affordability is definitely a big concern for Canadians. Actually, no matter their political stripe, it's just a common theme across our country right now. People are feeling the pinch. They're feeling that life is really expensive. They're wanting to live at a certain standard, and they're not able to meet it. They're feeling pinched. They're feeling the margin is small. So when it comes to housing in particular, I think one of the things we have to look at, and that Andrew Scheer is committed to, is looking at the way that we approve mortgages and making sure that a first-time home buyer can get into the market.
Because the stress test has really had a big impact on a lot of families, right?
You got it, absolutely. And so, you know, one of the things that the Liberals did is they put the stress test in place and you know, a myriad of other rules in place in order to help slow down the market in places like Toronto and Vancouver. That might work there, but at the end of the day, that's not good for Canada. It's not good for a region like Lethbridge. And so really we need to think far more regionally, far more local, and we really need to think about what's good for that next generation that's coming up and wanting to get into the market so that they can build equity.
Climate change has been a real hot button issue as well during the election, especially
Yes.
with the federal leaders. What is the Conservative plan regarding climate change and the climate crisis that a lot of people are talking about?
For sure. Hal, I love this question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about a really tangible plan that's going to produce real results in Canada. And so really, you know, right now we have a carbon tax that's been put in place by Trudeau. But what's happening then is he's collecting this tax and then it's going right into general revenue. Well, that's not going to advance green technology. That's not going to make our Earth a better place to live. And so really there are some concrete things that need to be done here. Number one, let's look after our air. Let's look after our water. Let's look after our land. Let's expand our conservation efforts. Let's expand our national parks. But further to that, let's look at some really tangible things, such as right now, there's raw sewage that's being dumped into the St. Lawrence River and into the Pacific Ocean just off Vancouver. No one wants to talk about that. Why not? That's atrocious. Like, that should not be happening in a place like Canada. We are a first world country where we have the opportunity to do much, much better. And so we need to fix that, and that's something that Andrew Scheer is very committed to. And the other thing is we have incredible investments that have been made in green technology here in our country, incredible innovation and science.
Like
and so,
solar, wind turbines?
Yeah, solar and wind turbines for sure, but also, you know, Suncor right here in Alberta just came up with a technology that actually reduces carbon emissions by 25% if this technology is used. That's huge. Let's talk about that, and then not only talk about it, but let's take some of these technologies and actually export them. Let's help other countries, such as China and India, which are, you know, increasing in their economic movement forward, but need some assistance perhaps in terms of how they take care of the environment. And Canada can really play a key role in that.
Here in southwestern Alberta, we rely a lot on agriculture. It's a big part of who we are, big part of our identity. Cavendish Farms opening up their new plant, $430 million, employing hundreds of people, which is wonderful. How can the Conservatives help farmers?
For sure. And I'm so glad that you asked that question, because unfortunately, in the Liberal platform, actually, you don't even see the province of Alberta mentioned once. Not even once. Every other province is mentioned, but not Alberta. And Alberta is this incredible agricultural superpower, not only in our country, but in the world. And so we have this incredible gift to give, and that is agriculture. It's the production of food. And so let's celebrate that. Let's make sure that farmers have the opportunity to trade their commodities, to get them to market, to advance their businesses. Let's make sure that we celebrate the fact that they are actually taking carbon out of the environment, and some of the best ambassadors for our environment that are out there.
How about the canola farmers? How can we help them, especially with the trade embargo with China?
Great question as well. So, when it comes to trade, certainly right now our canola farmers are struggling, our pork farmers are struggling, and so that has to do with some retaliation measures that took place from places India, China, and unfortunately that is due to the current government that's in place right now. With a new government, with Andrew Scheer, we would have the opportunity to advance those relationships once again, to restore that diplomacy, and to be able to reopen trade to countries like India, like China, but there are many, many, many other opportunities as well.
So if Andrew Scheer becomes Prime Minister, will we see a repeal of Bill C-69 and C-48? Will we see a pipeline being built?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Absolutely. It has to get done. Look, Canada is full of potential, and its people need to be empowered for a vibrant future. And one of the best ways to do that is by getting the pipeline in the ground. Right now, we rely on places like Saudi Arabia, where they have absolutely no environmental standard and no respect for human rights. Why are we buying our oil from places like that? Why are we supporting a regime like that when we have the ability to actually develop our own natural resource right here in Canada and do it in an environmentally responsible manner and create high-paying jobs at the same time and generate tax revenue from the development of that industry, which then goes to building schools and hospitals and roads and bridges and recreational infrastructure and keeping our pensions alive? Let's celebrate Canada. Let's get our energy to market. Let's develop our future and make sure that people are empowered.
So let's talk about education now, Rachel. Some of the other candidates we've had here in studio have told me about free post-secondary education, all Canadian kids, university colleges. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? There's no doubt about it that students certainly struggle when they're in university and college, and it can be really expensive. I think one of the biggest expenses actually is textbooks. I
remember paying $250 for textbooks when I was in college.
Totally.
That was a long time ago.
So,
yeah.
I may have graduated a little more recently, and
Yeah.
I remember having one textbook that was over $500 for a textbook. Like, it's just crazy. So I think that there are some measures that governments can take in terms of that sort of thing, but also, increasing access to student loans, increasing access to grant money that is available, and then also loan forgiveness once a person graduates. All of those are really important steps, and we need to make sure that we're helping students have every opportunity possible to pursue a higher education.
Some people have spoken with as well, Rachel. They're really concerned with a Conservative government. There's going to be cuts to healthcare, cuts to education. How do you put those fears at ease, especially when it comes to healthcare and helping our seniors?
Hal, you know what we'll cut? Asia Infrastructure Bank. Because right now we're building pipelines for China, but we're not building our own. So let's not. Let's stop doing that. Instead, let's put Canadians first. So yeah, let's make investments in healthcare. That's a great idea. So one of the things that Andrew Scheer is committed to doing is actually increasing the healthcare transfer payment that goes from federal government to provincial governments by 3%. Not just the first year, but every single year. So then that provides predictable funding, right? So then provinces know that they can count on that increase every year, and they can build their programs accordingly, which will ultimately serve Canadians really well. So for example, in this region, we have many, many, many seniors, about 55% of our population. And so, what does it look like to look after them? Well, it looks like access to a hip surgery or access to a knee replacement. These are the types of health, this is the type of healthcare that is needed for this generation, and we want to make sure that that happens.
What about tackling the huge debt that Canada currently has right now and get back to black, a balanced budget?
Oh, such a common sense question, Hal. Absolutely, I appreciate the question. I think we should. Of course we should, right? It's good for our country. Right now, we're only a few years away from paying the same amount to service our debt, so just interest. We are going to be paying the same amount on interest as we would for healthcare for our entire country. That should concern Canadians. So imagine if we were able to do away with that debt, if we were able to get back to balance, we would have this surplus of cash that we would be able to put towards incredible social programs, incredible infrastructure, and really get our country going again.
The Liberals in the NDP and other parties as well have talked about the problem we have with guns in our country, and the violence and the gangs and the guns. How do we tackle that?
We don't have a problem with guns. We have a problem with people. We have a problem with criminals. We have a problem with the misuse of a firearm. And so
get tougher on crime?
So get tougher on crime, absolutely. So, right now we have thousands of firearms that are coming across the border illegally. Let's shut that down. Let's give reinforcement to our border security in order to empower them to do that really well. You know, in addition to that, when we look at places like Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver, where there's these inner city crimes taking place, let's reinforce our frontline policing. In addition to that, let's be tougher on these individuals when they're caught. Criminals should probably be behind bars rather than loose on the streets. Liberals want to go soft on crime. We believe that we should be tougher on crime. The safety and security of Canadians is our utmost priority.
What about reconciliation, Rachel? Why would First Nations people, I mean, we have the Blood Reserve, Blackfoot Confederacy just out of our back door here in Lethbridge, 14,000 people. Yeah. We have a lot of First Nations people here in Lethbridge. How can we bridge that gap, and how can we work towards reconciliation with the Conservatives? What would that look like?
Yeah. So, you know, interestingly enough, in 2008, Stephen Harper offered an official apology to the Indigenous people in Canada, specifically with regards to the residential school systems and what took place there. And it was atrocious. And so it was right for him to offer that apology. But that was the first step. The rest of that reconciliation process is a process of repentance and forgiveness. And out of that comes relationship. And so now it's up to us as individual MPs, I believe, across this country to reach out to the Indigenous communities within our ridings and to build that relationship, to build that rapport, and to really understand what is needed to move forward in a positive direction. So that's certainly my responsibility here in Lethbridge, and it's something I take very seriously with regards to the Blackfoot Confederacy and reaching out and understanding the concerns that are there. I've met with a number of the elders and take every opportunity that I have to do so, and I believe that that's the responsibility of every MP. All 338 of us should be making that extending our hand and wanting to build that relationship and reconcile.
What's the Conservative plan for immigration and refugee policy?
Yeah. So our plan going forward with regards to immigration and refugees is that we would...
We still have a problem.
We have
a lot of illegal immigrants coming across the border into Quebec.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the big thing there is really, returning to a system that is fair, a system that is compassionate, a system that is orderly. And so if we're going to do that, we actually need to stop the flow of illegal immigrants that is currently coming across our border, because it's incredibly chaotic and it's actually holding back those who need to come to our country because their lives are at risk. So what's happening right now is our immigration system is overloaded with these individuals who have come illegally across our border. Meanwhile, you have individuals in places like Congo where their lives could be taken tomorrow and they're being rejected because of the backlog that currently exists in the system. That's not okay. That's not compassionate. That's not fair. That's not orderly. And that's not Canada.
One last question I have to ask you, Rachel. The two Michaels, Spavor, Kovrig, in China right now, being held captive. Meng Wanzhou, the CEO, the executive with Huawei, after she was taken into custody, extradition hearing to the United States, arrested in Vancouver for fraud charges. That's a really delicate situation. How are we going to bring those two Michaels back to Canada? What kind of a plan
well, first
we have
off,
to put in place?
Sure. So first plan, we need a new prime minister. It's that simple. We need a prime minister who can reach a hand out and build strong diplomatic relations. It starts with relationship building. It starts with trust. That's where everything starts. And then from there, who knows? Who knows what's possible? I think many, many, many positive things are possible once we have that in place.
So what kind of an image? How can we really change our image then in the international community so Canada has that respect?
Yeah.
That every country needs.
Absolutely. And you know what? We used to have it. We used to be the most respected country in the G7. And unfortunately, under the current government, that's no longer the case. So again, under a new prime minister, we have the opportunity to regain that spot, that place of respect, that place of honor, that place of building together for a vibrant future. Yes, for Canada, but as a globe, right? Wanting to build those relationships for the sake of trade, wanting to build those relationships for the sake of human rights, wanting to build those relationships for the sake of moving forward and being of benefit to one another as different countries.
Lethbridge Conservative candidate Rachel Harder and incumbent, thanks so much for joining me here today in studio.
Yeah, my pleasure.
In 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada legalized assisted suicide. Some rejoiced, while other people warned of a slippery slope and voiced concern for the vulnerable in our society. Where's our country headed with this issue? Joining me today via Skype from Ottawa is John Sikkema, legal counsel for ARPA, the Association for Reformed Political Action. Welcome to BCN, John.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, a Quebec Superior Court justice recently ruled that parts of both the federal and provincial laws on assisted suicide were unconstitutional because they're too restrictive. Can you give us a little bit of background to the story?
Yes. So, as you mentioned, in 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada struck down what was a full ban on euthanasia or assisted suicide. And after that, Parliament responded to that ruling by enacting a law which set 4 basic requirements that had to be met before someone could be euthanized. And those 4 were that someone first had to have a serious or incurable illness. The second is that they had to have a irreversible decline in capacity or capability. The third is that they had to have enduring physical or psychological suffering. And the fourth was that their natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable. But how foreseeable or when exactly that had to be wasn't set out. In fact, the law actually said a specific time prognosis didn't have to be given, but their natural death from their disease had to be reasonably foreseeable. So in this case, the provision that was removed was the latter, the last one, that the judge said it's too restrictive of people's freedom to say that they must be near death, that their natural death must be reasonably foreseeable before they can be euthanized.
Now, on the legal side of things, can you explain how it is that a provincial judge has the authority to overrule a federal law?
Sure. So this provincial judge is part of the Quebec judicial system, but is a federally appointed judge. This court is known as a constitutional court. It's which means it has the authority to rule on the constitutionality of any law. In that sense, it's kind of a core to our judicial branch of government. It's not just a statutory court. Now, in terms of its precedential value, technically this ruling would only be precedent, would only be binding on doctors in Quebec. The issue with that, however, is that it's a ruling about federal law. It's a ruling about the criminal code, which applies across the country. And it's a ruling about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which also applies across the country. So what we have here then is a question of really the consistent application of criminal law. Should something be not a crime in Quebec, but a crime in the rest of the country? It seems that the likely outcome of this ruling, if it isn't appealed, would be that people would be very unlikely to be prosecuted in any part of Canada for euthanizing someone whose death was not reasonably foreseeable, but who met the other requirements in the law.
So what part of the law did the judge find really too restrictive?
As I mentioned, it's only the provision that says a person's death, natural death, must be reasonably foreseeable.
Now that was placed there for a reason. Was it to provide some kind of safety boundaries for vulnerable people?
Right. So the law itself says that it's trying to achieve a balance, and part of what it's trying to balance is people's autonomy, people's right to decide when they want to die, but also the protection of vulnerable persons. And so, how does this rule protect vulnerable people from being pressured to end their lives? Well, one, it's thought that if we restrict access to euthanasia to those whose death is reasonably foreseeable, whose disease is foreseeably ending their life already, that narrows the group of people who are eligible. And so strictly on a numbers basis, you're less likely to normalize suicide when you don't make it so broadly available. Of course, for those whose death is not reasonably foreseeable, another part of the concern is that if they had the opportunity to get help to get through a particularly dark and difficult time, they might change their mind. Of course, if they are given access to euthanasia, if they are euthanized, that change of mind, of course, becomes impossible. Or access to new treatments and so on becomes impossible if if you might live for a long time had you not been euthanized.
John, shouldn't we have a little more concern about patients with mental health issues in this regard?
Absolutely. I believe one of the concerns is that by broadening access to euthanasia, for one, we just normalize it more. We've seen in other jurisdictions that where euthanasia, where assisted suicide is legalized and where access to it is broad, not only assisted suicide increases, euthanasia increases, but so does suicide. It sends a message to people, I think, that if assisted suicide is a dignified way to end your life, suicide may be as well. Suicide goes from a tragedy we should seek to avoid, as one commentator put it, to a solution to suffering that we may assist.
Now, there are a number of advocacy groups for the disabled who argued that this really sends a message to society that it's better to be dead than disabled. How do you respond to that?
I know the Council of Canadians with Disabilities has made that point quite strongly. I agree. Again, it's that messaging. Now, I assume the other side to that would say, look, it's not that we or anyone is telling you your life is not worth living. It's up to every individual to decide whether their life is worth living. And if you want to decide to end your life, that's your decision. But of course, when the law explicitly permits and pays for with tax dollars, physicians ending people's lives, the strong implicit message there, I think, is that while it may be your decision, both the medical profession and the government agree with your self-assessment that your life is no longer worth living. And that sends quite a message.
You know, we seem to have a bit of, mixed message going on in our society. On one hand, you have, talking about sponsoring suicide prevention, and then on the other hand, encouraging legalized suicide.
That's right. I know one Liberal MP during the debate on Bill C-14 opposed the bill, opposed legalizing euthanasia just for this reason. He said growing up in Attawapiskat and seeing some of the difficulties there, he thought, if some older people that he knew had decided that it just wasn't worth it anymore to try to go on in life, that he might have made the same decision as a young person who was struggling with thoughts of suicidality. And he was concerned with what message are we sending as a society to those who are struggling, to those who are disabled. And that implicit message is definitely one that disabilities rights groups are very concerned with.
What are we seeing in other countries around the world where assisted suicide has been legalized for a long period of time already?
One thing which I mentioned briefly was that in those countries, not only assisted suicide increases over time dramatically and steadily, that people continue to use it as it becomes more acceptable and normal, but also suicide itself also goes up. There's a study in the States showing that states that have legalized euthanasia have seen that, and also Belgium and the Netherlands studies there have shown that. But another thing that we've seen in the Netherlands and in Belgium is not only the steady increase in numbers of people who are euthanized, but also the percentage of requests that are granted. So when someone asks their doctor to euthanize them, it used to be that the doctor initially would respond to or say yes to a lower percentage of those requests. That has gone up as doctors basically get used to doing so. And access has broadened as well, both through legal changes, but also through just unofficial changes where the medical culture gets used to it and doctors kind of flirt with the edges of the law and sometimes outright violate it because they, as this gets normalized and as it's much more common, that it's much easier to get away with it, and prosecution is quite unlikely except in the clearest of cases.
Being a preteen or teenager is tough at the best of times. I mean, we've got school pressures, home life, a lot of anxiety, peer pressure. Where's our judicial system in our society when it comes to assisted suicide for kids?
Technically, it's still illegal, and the Truchon decision does not change that. However, it is remarkable if you think about the fact that in Carter, which kind of started this whole change in our law, Carter involved a plaintiff who had ALS, a severe neurodegenerative disease, who was nearing the end of life. The lower court in that case said the doctor could only euthanize her when she was very close to dying. In other words, it was to end the suffering, to kind of end a drawn out death, was how this kind of started. And then, just a few years later, we're talking about euthanasia for teenagers with depression. It's a remarkable shift. Now, while I said it is still illegal, thankfully, it is written into the law in C-14 that Parliament must study that issue by 2021. So that's something that parliamentary committee is going to look at. In the interim, though, the Canadian Council of Academics, I believe, has issued a report exploring the issue of expanding euthanasia towards to allow for young people to be euthanized. And they don't make any recommendation on that. They're not in the business of making policy recommendations in their report, but they do say it's a reasonable thing to discuss. It seems like it's not something that our medical profession or others are afraid to talk about, and it's one thing to have free debate, but it's quite something when this discussion is seen as pretty normal now. It's an idea that's out there. It's being discussed, and we'll see it probably debated in Parliament at some point.
John, how are hospitals and nursing homes that are opposed to assisted suicide based on religious grounds handling things right now?
So that is less a matter of federal national law, just to be clear. I think it depends on every province and even on municipal law. So some people may have heard of the Fraser Health Authority in British Columbia telling hospices that they should not be transferring people out of the hospice if the hospice does not want to euthanize people in the hospice. Of course, many hospices are in the business of providing palliative care, and they don't want to end people's lives. They want to help people, comfort people in the natural end to their life. That the Fraser Health Authority a municipal authority has told them that they should not be taking patients out of their facilities to be euthanized somewhere else, that they should be having them euthanized if that's what they want in their facilities. And my understanding is that's still a bit of a standoff. There are a couple of hospices I've read through the news that are refusing to comply with that, and it's not exactly clear. That may turn into litigation. I'm not sure. Generally, it's not a requirement, as far as I know, that any facility have euthanasia performed within its walls. But that's certainly those kinds of questions of freedom of conscience, both on an individual level and an institutional level, are going to continue to be debated.
What about physicians and medical professionals who are really opposed to the practice, assisted suicide? Are their conscience and religious rights going to be protected?
So in the federal law that legalized euthanasia specifically says, it actually mentions in the preamble to the bill that everyone enjoys freedom of conscience and religion, and this bill does not abridge freedom of conscience or religion. That's just kind of a signal from the government, that the federal government, that it's not deciding that issue or not meaning to restrict their conscience. But health professionals are regulated at the provincial level. And so we've seen in Ontario, for example, in the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario case against the Christian Medical and Dental Society, that in that case, the college said that physicians must, if they don't want to euthanize someone, they must refer that person to someone who is willing to euthanize them. Doctors didn't want that. Many doctors objected to that, and they lost their case at Ontario's highest court, which certainly doesn't bode well for the rest of the country. That's an important precedent. And so that continues to be a live issue in other provinces. Other provincial colleges governing physicians have done a better job, I think, of avoiding pressuring physicians to do that than Ontario. But Ontario, that case stands as a precedent that colleges can get away with pressuring physicians to do quite a bit in terms of indirect participation in euthanasia.
If there's a profit margin attached to the medical procedure of ending someone's life, there may be actually a conflict of interest there.
I think that's true. I mean, these doctors who are euthanizing people are billing the government for it. So there is money to be made there. But on a more systemic level, we know that in a publicly funded healthcare system where doctors are kind of the gatekeepers of costs, that there's a cost-saving incentive for the government to have people euthanized rather than to continue to give them care through their elder years, or for people who are disabled and need extensive care. That there's a perverse incentive there, of course, to end people's lives prematurely.
To what degree does our country need to expand palliative care for the majority of Canadians who want to live long lives despite some of their health challenges?
I read one study that said it was only 17% of Canadians who would like to have palliative care have access to it. Different studies will give you different numbers, but it's low. Most Canadians who would like to have palliative care do not have ready access to it. We certainly need more palliative care. Another issue related to that, the Canadian Council of Disabilities has pointed out that while our federal regulations for monitoring assisted suicide say that we should ask patients about services that they may want when they are seeking assisted suicide or when they're considering it, there's no requirement that we report any such data to Parliament or to Canadians. So we don't know how many people would like to have palliative care and yet are ending up being euthanized. That's just not being, that kind of data isn't being collected, whereas in places like Oregon, it is. And so the Council of Council of Canadians with Disabilities is advocating that we at least collect better data and see if we can't steer people out of the euthanasia path, even if it's legal, and towards better care for them to go on living.
John, we've only got about 15 seconds left here. Quickly, do you think the federal government will actually appeal the Supreme Court ruling?
I heard that in the French language debate, Prime Minister Trudeau said that his government would not. That actually does raise a lot of other issues about the Attorney General's duty to Parliament to defend a law that doesn't belong to the Prime Minister, does not belong to the Liberal Party. It belongs to Parliament. And that law, the ruling in Truchon, should be appealed so that the law stays in place and Parliament can continue to debate that law when it resumes.
John Sikkema, the legal counsel for ARPA, the Association for Reform Political Action, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.